Hello, welcome to Season 9 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. The theme of this season is 100 Years of Horror. We're going to watch two horror movies from every decade, from 1920 to 2020, in chronological order. We want to see where horror came from, how it's changed, and maybe even make some predictions about where it's going. If you want to see the full list of movies we'll be reviewing this season and follow along, then check out our website at thehorrific.com. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So we had originally planned to do Dracula, Prince of Darkness this week.
Yeah.
And then found out that there was not a good way of renting that anywhere. And apparently we could have done a free trial of Shudder and seen it that way. Except that the last 3 free trials that I did turned into a couple month subscriptions by accident.
Yeah, same.
And I really don't want to add to that list.
Same. Yep.
So we decided to pivot. And I did a little bit of research. And by research, I mean Googling.
It was very fast, yeah.
And I looked up best horror movies of the 60s. And I was having a hell of a time finding one we hadn't already done.
Mm-hmm.
We have done a lot of 60s horror movies,
yeah.
I've now realized. And I think that the 60s, I'm now realizing, were like a real creative time for horror. And there was a lot going on with it, and it took a lot of turns. I think the 60s were a real turning point for it, as far as like, you know, even starting with Psycho, like the darkness and the grit and the violence and the, you know, introduction of mental instability and just like a lot of other things, it really changed in the 60s. And so I wanted to find one that was like extreme, or one that, you know, generated controversy, or one that was, you know, not super mainstream. And I found a list on Collider that I think it was just like the 18 best horror movies of the 60s, which ended up being an awesome list with really good commentary. Kind of the opposite of Esquire, if you will. And one movie that it called out was Spider Baby from 1967. And I had never seen it, but after reading the description, I thought, I feel like someone wrote this specifically for my Horrific Podcast co-host.
You're right. Yeah. I thought initially when you told us about Spider Baby, it was to try to freak me out because of the kid that we're having. And I was like, that's a
you
mean,
and your wife, not
cruel trick right there. And then it had nothing, you know, it wasn't. Yeah. But I legit thought, okay. I'll fix it, change up a couple of these to like 4-hour films. That's punishment.
Yeah, right. Revenge.
Yeah, I had never heard of this film. I don't know if I even remember hearing it referenced, you know.
Oh, I never had, yeah.
Which just kind of blew my mind because, you know,
given your particular set of interests in movies, it seems like this one really should have been on your radar at some point.
Oh, is this not? Yeah.
I mean, I have not felt this much excitement since I introduced you to Taking Back Sunday.
I know,
when we were in high school. You know, I feel like this was a hit, and I will always be proud of it.
Yeah, you should, man. You should, because it was like we usually also don't talk about the films out before the podcast because we go into this like with our own opinions, but like this one I had to ask, like, did you like it or not? That's like
you're like, are we still friends?
Right, that was kind of the test, you know. And when I actually text you that I loved it, it was like 3/4 of the way through. Nice. And I was like, oh shoot, like we still have a ways to go before I may have put my foot, and I didn't. I was happy. Nice. But yeah, this was a diamond. If we don't get anything from this, 100 Years of Horror, like this is the diamond for me so far.
Yeah. Well, good. I'll go ahead and introduce it, and then you can do your fun facts, and then we will get into the arachnophobic details.
Oh. Yeah, I like that.
Anyway. In 1967, American General Pictures brought us Spider Baby, a very odd horror movie starring Lon Chaney Jr. and Sid Haig, among others. This film was written and directed by Jack Hill, who is known for his work in the exploitation film genre. It tells the story of 3 mentally diseased teenagers who have been locked away by their family. Their caretaker, Bruno, tries to shield them from the outside world, but even he can't stop some lawyered-up family members from coming to search the estate. It doesn't take long to find out that it's not the kids that need protecting, though. This movie is currently available to rent for streaming on Amazon Prime Video. And I did not watch it in 4K.
Me either, thankfully.
So what did you learn about this movie?
Well, so kind of like you mentioned, Lon Chaney Jr., which you guys should be familiar with from 2 decades ago. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or give or take a decade, was the Wolfman. It was really kind of trippy for me to watch this and see him because we just watched him 20 years younger.
Yeah.
It just kind of, like, it tripped me out because I was thinking Wolfman was, because of how we're doing these episodes, like, I thought, it's like, well, it wasn't that long ago. He was just a Wolfman. Like, God, past couple of years have been crazy. And I was like, oh, no, that's like 20 years. Like, that's a long time.
Yeah, but also he was living hard during those 20 years because he looked a little rough in this one.
Yeah, definitely. So it has Lon Chaney, who was in Wolfman, who was the Wolfman, horror icon. It also had Sid Haig, who was in House of a Thousand Corpses. He was in basically Rob Zombie's movies, but he's in Devil's Rejects.
Yes.
Which, I swear I didn't like this film just off of the fact that it was him, but I didn't know he was in it until I saw him in the film, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's a young, Captain, that's a young Sid, was what I was thinking. I forgot it. Anyway, it just kind of tripped me out, because it's like, he looks the same, just younger,
Yeah. He's very recognizable, yeah.
Yeah. So the original title for this film was supposed to be Cannibal Orgy, or The Maddest Story Ever Told. And in fact, if you search for this film, often you see it say Spider Baby / The Maddest Story Ever Told, or Spider Baby or The Maddest Story Ever Told. That was incorporated into the theme song and accumulated with lines that states the cannibal orgy is the strange to behold and the maddest story ever told.
Mm.
Something that I was reading about that I actually thought was thought was really interesting was Sid talking about how he avoided Lon Chaney. So I initially saw this fact on IMDb and did a little bit more reading about it. But basically, like, as you would think, like a young actor seeing, like, I don't know if I would assume he would be considered like a legend at that time because of Wolfman and all that, but he was like really intimidated by him, and so much so a couple days went by while filming, like he just avoided it, didn't talk to him, and Sid had to go pick up Chaney from his trailer, and basically he said, like, called him Mr. Chaney, and Lon Chaney responded back like, it's just Lon, you're Sid, let's leave it at that. And that was the end of the interaction, and actually did like really help him out moving forward. Like, he was able to kind of talk to him at that point, which that was kind of funny. So Lon Chaney also sings the film's theme song.
Oh, I did not realize that.
Yeah, which was pretty funny or interesting. And the last fact I have talking about budget. This was saying that the film had a $60,000 budget. Lon Chaney was paid a flat fee of $2,500 for his performance, and each of the other actors were paid $100 a day. Coincidentally, the price of the actors' salaries was the same as the daily rental of the Duesenberg that Bruno drives in the film. So basically, they were paid $100 a day, and that's also how much it cost for a car rental.
Huh.
You definitely get it. Small film, indie style film for the 60s, but so those are the facts that I have for this film.
Yeah, so you mentioned a couple things about that theme song. That was accompanying a very interesting opening credit sequence. It felt like it was The Grinch. Like I was worried we were about to watch an animated movie. Like I was really confused by that and had no idea what to expect. And so about 5 minutes in, when that's what's happening, I was just like, oh crap, I might have made a really, really poor recommendation.
Oh, we've all been there.
But after that, there was no real reference back to that. It seemed very disconnected, almost like something that was thrown on afterwards. And like you said, pretty low budget, maybe somebody had a hookup for animation that was going to be cheaper than trying to do anything real or something. I don't know. But anyway, then we get into it, and both the Wolfman and Captain Spaulding are in the same movie. I couldn't have been more delighted.
Yeah. I was thoroughly excited about that.
Yeah.
It was strange. Here's I guess the one, like, I still have beef with the film, even though I enjoyed it. The weird thing for me was at the start with the guy who was delivering the package, or, the letter to the house, like just that random house that he stopped by and like she was like rushing her kids in. Mm-hmm. It didn't have to be there. And it was like, I thought it was kind of frustrating because it was like, was that like, is this just a racist?
Yeah, thing? I wondered about that too.
Like, what was the deal with that?
Because then after she did it, he's like, I'm looking for the Mary house. And she's like, stay away from there, whatever. Like, to me, I had the same thought initially, but then I was like, okay, maybe this is just like, she's scared of outsiders because there's like dangerous cannibals in the neighborhood. So in retrospect, maybe it wasn't as like bad as it seemed in the first moment. But
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah. But then that guy didn't last long. And it got me thinking, because, we're just barely into the movie and he's getting like stabbed to death by a crazy person, right? And that's kind of where I was saying, like, in the 60s, it seems like things took a turn a little bit with horror movies. Like Night of the Living Dead and Blood and Black Lace and Eyes Without a Face. Like, it just seemed like in general, the gore level took a huge turn. Mm-hmm. And the blood and just kind of the violence in general really took a step up. And even going back to Psycho, sort of like the graphic nature of some of the stuff. And so it seems like, like slashers all of a sudden were a thing. And I did a little bit of reading because I'd seen the reference to the director on this one being, active in the exploitation film genre. And I didn't really know what that meant, but it's really just like anything that's like appealing to people's baser interests, so like popular things or things that people are kind of like fascinated by from like a morbid curiosity. And so the idea that this one's centered on people with like a mental disease and the idea of like cannibalism and the sort of slasher style, like all of that kind of fits into that. Whereas I feel like maybe exploitation is a thing that typically critics aren't real happy about in a movie, but I definitely see the influence of that like all over now. Mm-hmm. Like I don't think anyone would call a Quentin Tarantino movie exploitation, but he's doing a lot of these same things, right. Or like Rob Zombie, maybe a little more questionable on that side. But it was just interesting because I feel like a lot of the things that we see in movies now, this movie had the very like early beginnings of.
Yeah, I think that's exactly one of the reasons why I kind of enjoyed it, because I do feel like this did set the stage for like, certain horror films that are out there now that just revolve around like a weird small setting. Like I would even argue like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like those types of films that we love. It seems like this might, for me, like from what we've seen, knowing that we haven't seen them all, seems like it's almost kind of started the genre, the type of films that I really enjoy. That I it doesn't. It's not that it doesn't make sense the story wise, but like the issues that are coming, like it's just a little weird. And
yeah, well, and we didn't have to deal with an hour and a half of Melanie and Mitch, flirting.
Yeah.
Before we got into any action.
Yeah, there was no yeah, fuss in the film, I guess, is the best way to say it. And also, like, it had a little bit of depth to it, too, which, with the uncle, with Bruno, like, the way he was treating the kids, like, I felt like he was legit trying to help them.
Oh, agree. Yeah.
And he was legit trying to, like, he tried to tell them, like, these aren't normal kids, like, you can't, all this, and they just didn't want any part of it, and, man, he did what he had to do, like, unfortunately, to make sure it didn't go any further, but, yeah, it was just like, we hadn't really seen, I guess this was 67 when this came out, but you hadn't really seen, like, too many films out there with, like, a straight up psychopath, and not only that, you kind of have a couple, and you don't know which kid is good and what they, it's just, the stuff that they were doing was just like these were just terrible kids, that looked like adults, but they were just like, terrible people, and you had this, like, old dude who was trying to, like, care for him, and yeah, it was just, honestly, kind of tugged at you a little bit, because that there are kids out there who are just misunderstood. Anyway, I won't go into that. But that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed it, was how Bruno interacted with kids who were troubled like that.
Yeah, for sure. And that definitely made his character a lot more sympathetic, right? Like, you were clearly not supposed to like any of the outside family members that came. And I don't think you were really supposed to like the kids either. But Bruno's involvement made you feel sympathetic towards someone on the screen at least. And so even though people who aren't, like, good people are getting killed, you still feel bad about the situation, because you're like, this is what he's been trying to prevent this whole time, and like he's going to lose his house, and all that. So it was kind of a weird deal, but
there were also confusing things, like who were the people that were in the base. I don't know. It was just strange, some of the things that weren't really explained that well. But was it up to be mystery? Like, yeah,
I felt like a lot of the things that I read about this movie afterwards, because I found it really, like, fascinating. Like, when we were texting, I was like, I have so many questions. I want to know everything about, like, how this was made and who did it and who was involved and everything. And it was just like, I feel like in everything you read about this, like, the cannibalism and the other family members who were down there are, like, a way bigger part of the way people describe the story. But in the movie, those felt really minor to me.
Yeah, I can see that.
So, yeah. But anyway, like, there were definitely some really good scenes. And when, the first one that really got to me, because in the beginning, when the delivery guy gets stabbed, that was really shocking, and it was just kind of like, oh wow, what just happened? But the one that had more of, like, setup and suspense and more of, like, kind of that classic, like, master of horror feel was when Schlocker, is that his name, is in the basement, and then he looks up and he sees the silhouettes of the two girls on the stairs, and then later Bruno sees him, like, getting lifted up the dumbwaiter. And it's just like, oh dang, they got him, and just that feeling of anticipation of him, like, being caught down there. Because the whole time that you're seeing them interact with the rest of the family, it's like they're putting on an act. But you also haven't really spent a lot of time with them outside of that, so you don't really know what their motivations are or what they're capable of. You just know that they're dangerous. And I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think for me, and I don't know if I've ever noticed this before, but something that seemed really relevant with this film was that, they set the stage at the beginning with that murder early on. And you know how I say I like them to get to action, to get the focus there. But what this did in this situation is it set the stage for, another scene that I thought was really good. And that's when one of the ladies, I don't remember which one, was what got to the house, and she was trying to, get in. And I think it was like the first one, the sister that came in, is she stuck her head through the window the same way that the delivery guy did. And it, like, that intense moment of, like, is she going to get caught too? Like, and then, she gets pulled away at the last minute, from a creepy Ralph. But yeah, I mean, it was just like, it was, I get that it's, just a small budget film, but that's really thought out. Like, that's a thought out process there, that, I think a lot of films could kind of benefit from, of like
Yeah.
setting the stage. And we've said this with a few movies out there, that you don't have to have the biggest budget to have a good story. Like that's just up to you and your writer, whatever. And they kind of prove that in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I get the feeling that this one was a very DIY type movie. Like there was not a lot of studio money behind it, and the film quality and the sound quality, especially in some parts of the movie, were just awful.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I mean, lower quality than like stuff from the 40s for sure.
Yep.
But like you said, those weren't the things that made the movie good. Those weren't the things the movie was trying to rely on to be good. It was, focused a lot more on the intensity in the story and everything else. My one real complaint with it, though, was at the dinner party where they're like talking about horror movies, mm-hmm. and they're like talking about all the classic Universal monsters and of course the Wolfman, and then Lon Chaney Jr. says there's going to be a full moon tonight, and then it pans around the table, and the kids are all looking creepy, but then they keep bringing up like the Wolfman thing.
Yeah.
And it's just like, we get it. Okay. We all get it. But I feel like, film genre lovers making a movie on a small budget would have just been so excited to throw that in there.
Oh yeah.
With him, being involved in everything, but it made me roll my eyes twice.
Yeah. I think, once, that's a cool catch. That's something that's cool, but, it didn't have to be done to continue the story.
Yeah.
And, we like to get to the chase from time to time, and,
Word.
Yeah, that was definitely missing out. And the dinner scene overall was strange to me, because as a human who has normal thoughts, my thought would be like, if someone like offered me that for dinner, like I would just leave.
Yeah. Like
there's no, and especially in that situation where it's your place anyway, like but there, I did kind of enjoy a little bit of the humor, not of all like the meals that they were doing, because like some of it was just like above and beyond, but like I really liked the idea of the garden salad that they made, which was just grass, like long. Amazing. Like I was laughing at that. I was like, that's actually pretty funny. Like that'd be hilarious to put in, just a comedy, But.
Yeah. And it was, there were definitely some things that weren't like super cohesive about it. Like you said, like why didn't they just leave when obviously the food situation was terrible? Also, why would they have stayed in the house when it was like very clearly a bad situation? But also the contrived scene where the girls go after Aunt Emily and then Ralph ends up catching her. It's like, why was she wearing that particular outfit? Right. I mean, that was 100% just for, to get something racy in the movie to, right. Get people talking. And, but after that, it really didn't make sense to me. Like Ralph ended up catching her, but then later she's coming into the house, like calling for him. But you never get, because it was weird.
He did her dirty. He raped her.
Did he though?
Mm-hmm.
Well, did you read that somewhere?
Yes.
Okay. But still, her reaction to that made me not know what was going on.
Yeah, that's one thing I think I struggle with, like some of these older films where it's like the reaction is just like a play reaction of like, you act traumatized. Well, how do you act traumatized? You just stand there and zone out and you say, that's not the case, and there's the overreaction that can happen from time to time too. But yeah, it was just like a weird, like that whole situation was strange because it was like they were trying to kill the guy, but she was trying to hurt Ralph, and like so you had one girl. It was just a weird mix there, and like so much so that my brain was kind of like almost like losing focus of what was happening because of the mayhem that was going on, which might have been what they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely almost felt surreal like that. Because, Bruno kind of went into almost like a trance when he's like, okay, I'm just going to go get the dynamite and end the whole thing. And everything else that's going on is just so weird and out there. And then when, I forget which of the girl that thought she was the spider wraps up the uncle and then is like sitting in his lap trying to seduce him. It was just like, holy crap, that's very, very deeply disturbing. And there was that look on his face almost of like not believing it, but it also didn't look like nearly as disgusted as it should have. Like it was just weird and uncomfortable.
Like he was almost accepting it in a
it was
way,
really, really strange. And so that whole thing was just very odd.
Well,
and
his character was strange too, like overly nice and stuff. It was weird.
Yeah.
But there was like a brothers, so they were brother and sister, right? But like in the car, there was even like a weird reference where he said something that was like, and yet again, I may just look too much into it, but like he said something that was like, I don't want to say sexualized, but romanticized or something. And she said something back, like called him little brother, as like a response of like, slow your roll kind of thing. I thought, and I was like, well, if that's like their relatives, and that's, I don't know, it's just a weird mix there.
Yeah. But I realized I had a lot of similar feelings in this one that I did when watching The Devil's Rejects. Like there are scenes that are just really, really uncomfortable to watch. And that is obviously what the movie was trying to do, and it succeeded. So there you go.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We're on to you, Rob Zombie. We're finding all your tricks.
Well, maybe it was Sid that told, maybe true, he's the real brains behind all this.
That's a good point.
Yeah. But yeah, so in the end, the uncle and the rando girl, I never did figure out her role in all this. She was like a secretary or what. But they get out and survive, get married, have a kid, and then the kid's a creeper.
Yeah. Sure shows that it runs in the family.
Yeah, even though he wasn't from that branch of the family. But, yeah. But then, at the end, it does the classic, the end, and then the question mark appears. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't a question, it was the end. They never made a follow-up.
Right, yeah. That was one thing I was kind of going to say earlier, where, like, it's kind of nice being in the period before, like, all the, like, not remakes, but the sequels.
Yeah, everything had to have 1,000 sequels.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the reasons why you can have, like, abrupt ending, Mm-hmm. I get what I don't think they were putting the question mark at the end to say that a sequel's coming. I think it was more so to say like the story's not over with.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was almost like another one of those things I rolled my eyes at, where it was just like, okay, this is clearly a hat tip to sort of the over the top horror genre that it's embracing. But yeah,
and it's really nice too, because like I feel like if someone's writing a story and they think that there could be a part 2 to it, they're not going to put their best work all in one.
Yeah.
Or a lot of times you have all your best work and then you have to come up with the follow-up, which is where you have the sophomore slump kind of thing happen. But yeah, with this, I mean, I think it was over the top in a way. Like the storyline was kind of original. It was low budget, which I respect. I don't like it just because it's low budget. I respect if they do good work in a low budget. Like that's what I like. That's like
like they have a vision for it and they figure out just how to make it happen,
right?
Despite the limitations that are being imposed on them by the lack of budget.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, hey, these bigger companies may have come out and said like we aren't going to finance this, and they said, well, that's fine, we'll do it ourselves, but we're going to do it ourselves, and that's how they can have a lady in lingerie, running around for no real purpose than to run around in lingerie, and but it did this set the stage for so many like current horror films out there. Like there's just so many weird references that you kind of just picked up on that you're just like, man, this is, it's later 60s. It was going into 70s. And, but still, like the stuff that they were doing wasn't too far off where we were just surprised in The Birds that there was a bloody scene, a guy with blood on him. Right. So it's just them to kind of get that accomplished and then, have the kind of content that was in there for the 60s. It's just like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely had that feeling of, I've seen this before during a lot of these scenes where it's like things that happened after it, not before it. Yeah. So, yeah, interesting stuff.
Just psychopaths, doing the thing, and Lon Chaney having just or Bruno having to just do what he needed to do, and thinking he saved saved, which I think in that situation he could die thinking that was the case, and
yeah. Sometimes you just gotta kind of burn it all down.
I have dynamite just in case.
Oh yeah, same.
I think I am the dynamite, actually.
You're my dynamite.
Aw. You're my flame. You started that one.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
We are recording Spider, baby. That's not a click. You can't click. You can't click bad accents.
Just trying to get attention. Hey.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're
Focus. Right. Focus.